Tonight's subject is learning English naturally. I'm pretty sure everybody's here because they're learning English. I think the first place to start is how we learn language in schools and from teachers. I think most people learn first visually. First we see the words. We learn the vocabulary maybe by seeing the words, learning to read the words, and maybe hearing how they're pronounced. After that, you might learn how to write the words, maybe to fix them in your memory. Then work on speaking and maybe listening. This particular technique is what's used in most places around the world, but unfortunately, and maybe crazy as it seems, it's not natural. Let's take a look at how people learn languages natural, how babies learn. Okay, for example, I have a baby and I'm observing her whole process of acquiring a new language. Her process begins first with listening. She hears language coming in, repeated again and again and again, and she begins to associate. After a year, somewhere between 1 year and 2 years, she begins to say some words like mama, papa, more, things like that. As she progresses, obviously her vocabulary increases and she makes mistakes. Now, when she makes mistakes, mama and papa correct her. Maybe she'll continue making mistakes for a while, but with enough correction, she stops making mistakes. She will improve her language skills and begin to speak. She'll only really begin to study the language when she gets to school. And the interesting thing about this is that by the time she gets to school, she'll be speaking fluently. She'll be understanding. She won't be making mistakes. She'll really just be studying what she's doing. And this process is just a manner of formalizing something that she already does naturally. The natural process is first listening, okay? After you've listened and acquired enough, you begin to risk speaking, and you're going to make mistakes. Now, mistakes are an important part of the process. In fact, they're absolutely essential. Without them, you're not going to grow. Nobody's perfect, and if you were perfect, then you wouldn't need to learn anything. Okay, so making mistakes is essential. They're going to point out the direction that you need to go, how you need to improve. Right? Only after you've imitated and spoken should you begin to first read and then imitate it by writing. Okay? It's a very simple, natural process. First listen, then speak, then read, and only afterwards writing. Now look at what we normally do in schools with students. We normally take it and invert it. We begin with reading and writing, and then listening, and then finally speaking. And that's one of the reasons why I get a lot of people telling me that I can read, I can write, I can understand, but I can't speak. And it's because the learning process was inverted, where speaking should have been number 2 and not number 4. You can learn to understand English by listening to English, but you're not going to learn to speak unless you speak. Make mistakes, lots of mistakes. Listen, I've been in this country where I am for 22 years now, Brazil. Here we speak Portuguese. Portuguese is complicated. Oh my God. 22 years of 24 hours a day Portuguese. And I still make simple grammar mistakes. My Portuguese isn't bad, it's pretty good, but I still make mistakes. So making mistakes is essential. And not just essential, but it's normal. After a certain amount of time, even though you've acquired a certain level of the language, to continue making mistakes. Repeated mistakes are an indication that you need to work on something. About exams. Exams are about taking exams. They're not only about your command of the language. And that's really important to remember. I know students who didn't have a fantastic command of the language but could do very well on tests. And I knew students who had an excellent command of the language but would do very poorly on tests, particularly on proficiency tests. So something you want to remember when you're dealing with test taking is that most of it's about how to take the test. What does the test want from you, and how to attend the questions on the test. obviously, generally, with limited time. Not so much about the English language, but more about your ability to take the test, and I would say at least 50% of it is. So prepare for the test itself. Getting back to learning English naturally. The most important thing for you to do is expose your ears to as much English as possible. You have to develop what we call auditory memory. Auditory memory is what's going to tell you what's correct and what's not correct. The more you listen to English spoken naturally by native speakers, the more you'll develop your auditory memory. And your auditory memory will immediately tell you when you say something, that's not right. You won't necessarily have access to what is right, but in the moment, you'll know that it's not right. There are different techniques that you can use to define what is right, and maybe that's a subject for another video, okay? But that auditory memory is essential to give you that sensation that something's correct or incorrect. So at least you know to stop and check it, think about it, or maybe even ask about it, okay? So that's step number one. Listen, 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 listen. And I've talked about this in a video on listening, what you can do. Passive listening, putting on something in the background and just listening to it passively, or not paying attention to it. Just allow your brain to become accustomed to it. Guys, remember, this thing we've got in here is incredible. It never, ever stops. It's constantly paying attention and analyzing all of the information that's coming in. So even though you may be cooking, you may be doing something else, you may be talking to somebody, but you've got English going in the background, your brain is paying attention to it, okay? So that's step number one. Step number two, obviously, is practicing speaking, okay? I don't know what you guys have available in terms of practicing speaking, but I know for certain there's somebody near you that speaks English. Here in Brazil, for example, I get a lot of students who say, oh, an American came to work the other day and I was so shy, I didn't say anything to him. And I think to myself, oh my God, you just wasted an incredible opportunity. So take those opportunities. When you have access to a native speaker, glue yourself to them and speak to them as much as you can. Take every opportunity. Why? Because down the line, what you're really doing outside of practicing and learning, what you're really doing down the line is building your confidence. If you have confidence, you're going to rock and roll. And let me explain what I mean, because I've been working this for years. And like I said, I've seen students who can do very well on an exam, but don't necessarily have great command of the language, and students who have great command of language and do poorly on an exam. And sometimes people who don't have great command of a language have enough confidence where they can get up in front of a group and actually speak in English. And other people who have fantastic command of the language can't get up, can't speak in front of other people. What's the real issue here? The real issue is confidence and building that confidence. So, how do you build it? Practice. Make mistakes. Correct your mistakes. No, you're not going to die from speaking, and practice again. That way, you'll gain confidence. Take any chance you have to speak in English in public, as terrifying as it may be. That way, you'll acquire the natural confidence you need to be able to use the English that you have. Is your English ever going to be perfect? Unless you have an enormous facility for learning languages, your English will probably not get very close to native. I've been here, like I said, for 22 years. My Portuguese is good, but it's nowhere near native. I still have an accent. I still make mistakes. Everybody who speaks to me says, so where are you from? So don't worry about your English being native or your English being perfect. The question is, what level of functionality can you achieve with your English? And how you can improve that functionality. And that's really what this is dedicated to, giving you tips, giving you tools to improve your English. I only speak naturally in the videos. Why? because it would be a disservice to you if I didn't. If I spoke slowly and intentionally, I would alter my pronunciation. I would probably change my rhythm. I would give emphasis to words that do not receive emphasis. And I would give you an impression that English is something that it's not. And then you would go out there thinking, oh, I understand native speakers because I understand Mr. Weber when he speaks. But you won't, and you'll have difficulty with it. So, number one, I speak naturally so that you can get exposure to English spoken naturally. You can build your auditory memory, even though it's not easy. The other thing is that most of the videos have captions, so you'll be able to see what I'm saying. YouTube allows you to slow the video down. I think that what you can really use to measure your improvement is your confidence level, because that's what's really going to make a difference. Your English can be perfect, but if you don't have the confidence, you're not going to use it. Your English can be really rudimentary, but if you have the confidence, you're going to go out there and use it. People are going to understand you, and you're going to be able to communicate. And the more you do that, your ability to use it is going to improve. So instead of you trying to measure your English, why don't you focus on your confidence level? You speak American English, right? Yeah, I do. I'm from the US. I did do a video about American versus British English. Check it out. Step number one, listen. Step number two, speak. Step number three, read. Step number four, write. Wow, prepositions in English are complicated, I'll be honest. The other thing is that we have a lot of prepositions and we use them very differently, I think, than most other languages. Outside of building your auditory memory by exposing yourself to English spoken naturally, where you'll notice how the prepositions are used in different ways. If you're here tonight, you have access to the internet and you have access to millions of tools. Practice, practice, practice. There are sites that will allow you to practice everything from prepositions to phrasal verbs. Okay, first, let's do the music thing. Music's art, it's not life. Don't try to relate it to English being spoken naturally. It's art. They have artistic license or poetic license to do whatever they want. And you shouldn't imagine that that's how English is really spoken. I'll give you an example. Love Me Do by the Beatles. Love, love me do, okay? We don't say that to begin with. You know I love you. No, we don't say, you know I love you. You know I love you. Appreciate music, understand the lyrics, fantastic, but don't take that as English being spoken naturally. Now, movies, and that's why I love them. Because nobody in the movie is going to speak slowly so you can understand. It's English spoken naturally. And I understand that it's frustrating, and it can make you sometimes want to give up or maybe break something. Don't give up. Don't break anything. Watch the movie again and again. Then put it aside. Watch a different movie. Watch a different movie, go back to it, and watch it again. And try to notice if your comprehension of that first movie hasn't improved. And I think you'll notice that it has. Linking words. English is mostly about linking words. We use very simple constructions and connect them with beautiful connectors. Try to incorporate English into your daily life just by doing really, really simple things. Simple sentences, okay? So at some point in your day, you're probably going to be stopped at a traffic light in a car. You may be driving, you may not be driving, and it doesn't really matter. Now, if you look out the window, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice a man. What's the man doing? The man is standing on the sidewalk. It wasn't a huge, amazing, incredible sentence, but it was English and it was perfect. Don't try to be too ambitious. Baby sentences. Start with baby sentences, baby steps, okay? The man's pants are blue. Fantastic. The woman has long hair. Her hair is brown. Start with simple sentences like that. Make it a game. Everywhere you are, when you notice you're not doing anything, you're not thinking about anything, you're at work. Look, the paper's on my desk. There are a lot of words on the paper. Just incorporate English into your daily life. So going back, what's step number one? Listen. Step number two, speak. Step number three, read. Step number four, write. You want to impress people with your English? Connecting or linking words. study them, you learn how to use them for writing and for speaking. What's a fantastic way to learn really cool linking words, how they're used, and remember them? Reading. Thank you all very much.